Sosuke Aizen, the legendary Shinigami who pretty much fooled all of the Gotei 13, started his own utopia, and planned everything about the protagonist of Bleach, Ichigo Kurosaki, and ultimately planned his own demise, or his ultimate failing of his sealing, and pretty much came back and was shown to be able to break out whenever he wishes. But this said Shinigami had the powers to put someone in ultimate hypnosis without even going through the incantations Kudakade Kyoka Suigetsu. What would happen if the same individual were to train a protagonist from the anime Danmachi, and this character would be Belle Cornell? What would change in the events of Danmachi, and how would Belle's characters change overall? We'll be going over that in this What If, as this is part 5 and this will be the finale. Should be around 30 minutes this part, and the movie special, if we add them all together, 5 parts, 30 minutes each, that should be around 2 hours and 30 minutes, about 2 hours and 35 minutes possibly, it just depends. But without further ado, guys, roll that intro. Alright, so we resumed this What If, as Belle would have been, sleeping in his bed with his partner next to him, I guess, as he would have been interrupted by a thought in his head. This would not be just a regular thought, it would be Aizen trying to talk to Belle. Aizen would tell, Belle that it was time. And obviously the viewers don't know what Aizen means, but Belle knows. In his time being trained by, Aizen, he had been told that once he gets strong enough, he'll be trained by Aizen directly, like sparring. He never truly sparred Aizen before, only was given advice on how to use his Kido or his Kyoka Suigetsu properly, but he had never fought Aizen before, and he was kind of scared. Aizen was pretty strong, and he didn't know what he could do against Aizen. He pretty much got everything from Aizen, and it would be kind of weird to use his own tactics against him, since he must have some contingency plan against that. But without further ado, we'll get into the fight, or at least when he goes into the mindscape. So he'll tap his sword as he'll go into the mindscape, as once he'll get there, it'll been, like I said, it would have been that mountain, the landscape with the garden of flowers and butterflies. Obviously, it's very symbolic if you get the forms of, symbolism from the butterflies, and the forms that Aizen goes through, like the chrysalis, and then the cracking, and then the butterfly form. But pretty much what would happen is Belle would go into his mindscape, as he would see Aizen standing on the edge of the precipice, as he would tell Belle to come over here. Belle would walk up to the mountain, for some reason feeling the need to stay back, but he still went forward. As Aizen says, "Did you notice it, by the way?" As Belle would say, "Notice what?" As Aizen would say, "There's something special with this specific mountain. Usually anyone who comes into this mindscape and tries to walk over the mountain will feel the fear of, devolving in a sense, or just descending, growing weaker, and they become fearful because they see the edge of the precipice. But you felt that fear, but you didn't stop. Why is that?" As Belle would start to think, "Oh, why did I stop? I don't know, I just wanted to keep going forward, I just wanted to do it for that reason." As Aizen would say, "Oh, so you did it just because you felt the need to, because you could do it?" As Bell would say, yeah, pretty much. As Aizen would say, alright. You know how I told you when I first met you, I told you that once you get to your limit, I could shatter your limits and make you become stronger, exponentially stronger. As Bell would say, yeah, I remember that. Is it that time? As Aizen would say, yeah, I'm gonna train you myself, and this time you're gonna be fighting me constantly. As you fighting me will have you go above your limits and reach new heights. As Bell would kind of gain a smile before he would unsheath his sword or manifest it. As him and Aizen would start fighting, they would spar with Aizen giving him the intent to kill, basically imposing his Ryatsu on him, giving him the feeling that Aizen's gonna kill him. Obviously he wasn't going to, but this put Bell on his tiptoes. I get just put him on his toes. What am I saying? So like every time, like the first few minutes he was good, he was clashing until his Ryatsu started to deplenish, I think that's the word. Deplete, that's probably better. As pretty much he would start to go, like any swing he did, that was on energy that he just randomly formed. Now this would be Bell on his last legs, as he would try to fight. This would cause him to slowly but surely crack his limits, as he would gain more and more Ryatsu from doing that, and Aizen can see that this is what's happening. So he would continue to clash with Bell, as Bell was just really holding his own. As pretty much what would happen is Bell would go to swing, as he would purposely demanifest his sword, as he would, Aizen would kind of be left on guard with his sword in the middle of a swing, as Bell would then re-manifest it and then go to swing at Aizen, as a huge spell would appear near Aizen's neck, as this would be the same defensive spell that he used to defend himself against Ichigo in the fake Harakura town. As Aizen would say, good, you learned my lesson. A creature's weakest point is near their head, and once you cut that off, they're killed. Nothing you can do about that. As Bell, as he would congratulate Bell, saying, look at yourself. As what would happen is Bell would look down, as you would see this orb in his chest, as it was spouting out white substances. That sounded sus. But it was like a white shell going over his chest that would start to spread out through his body before it would go up to near his neck. As Aizen would say, I see the chrysalis shell is forming around your body. Once you get to the end of the stage, you should be into the butterfly. As pretty much Bell would get the idea why there's so many butterflies here. As he would continue to fight with Aizen, and even them going into Shikai, trying to hypnotize them, and every time they're about to slice each other, they'd realize they were in the other's hypnosis, or they'd clash with Kido, with one clashing with Raika Hose, or trying low level Kidos with exponential Ryatsu, making it the power of a level like a Kido in the 90s. And pretty much what would happen is Bell would remember one of the Kidos Aizen taught him. He would say, Hado no Kyuju, Goryo Tenmetsu. As 5 purple dragons would form behind him, as the landscape would start to shake from the attack, as he would then charge forward with the 5 dragons coming behind him. As Aizen would do the same, as the dragons would clash with the other, and Aizen would clash swords with Bell, as there'd be a huge shockwave, as a huge tremor would be felt throughout the landscape, as obviously it would be quickly repaired since it is in their mind. Anything you imagine will be brought to you. As what would happen is Bell would use a trick. He wouldn't think of a binding Kido that would stop Aizen, but Aizen couldn't break out of it. As a huge pillar would fall from the sky, as it would go to, surround Aizen in his zone, and pretty much Aizen can't get out of this. As Aizen would look around, as he would say, interesting, you used the Kido that I couldn't block, and you used not your Ryatsu, but the power of your mindscape itself. And since I reside here, I'm forced to abide by those rules. But there's something you forgot. I wasn't here to start with. As what would happen is he would say, Kudakare, Kyoka Suigetsu. As Aizen would just shatter into glass, as he would look to his right, as Aizen would just be standing there watching. He hasn't even been fighting the whole time, yet he had seen Bell progress all the way to his chrysalis form. As Bell would be like, "What do you mean?" Until he would finally comprehend it, or finally see it. He would look down as he would see his whole body is covered in a shell, as he would say, "What is this?" As what would happen is Aizen would say, "The stronger you evolve, the more you take on my appearance, and at the end you'll almost look like a replica, and I would be fully merged with you. But that means when I merge with you, I won't be here anymore. It'll just be you, Mr. Cornell." As Bell would kind of attain a solemn look. He had truly liked Aizen's presence in the world, because he's never met someone like Aizen. But I guess that was the point. You were supposed to meet people you didn't really know, or didn't have much characteristics like everyone else. Someone who is unique. Someone who can't be replicated. As he would kind of put on a sad look before he would get back to training. As Aizen would say, "Don't worry, my life was already over. I already became Soul King in my world, but everyone else who pretty much had a part in sealing me away was either dead or really old. So it didn't feel like much of a satisfaction. But there's gods and goddesses in this world who rival even my power. But now you have the power to go above them, superiorly above them, like really above them." But what would happen next is he would train as Aizen would help Bell gain his butterfly form, as this form would just be Bell with basically long white hair, as obviously he wouldn't look exactly like Aizen, like with the brown hair. He would still have his usual red eyes and white hair, as his hair would grow longer. And this time he hadn't noticed, but time in this landscape went differently. It was distorted. Every second out there was like a week in here. So Bell was constantly growing, as he would see that he had like really long white hair, almost down to his middle back. As he would see his eyes, they looked more hollow now, and they had like black, like his pupils were still red, but around it, the surrounding it of his eyes, they turned black. As Aizen would say, "Oh, don't worry about that. That's just your evolution. If you want, you can go out of this form and go into your base form, I guess you would call it, and you wouldn't have the same long hair. But it's all your choice." As Bell would kind of shake his head, as he would kind of laugh for some reason at this, not laugh maniacally, but just kind of chuckle at the power he has attained. He remembered the first time he came into Arario, he was just a weak little boy, and nobody would ever recruit him, at least not until he met Lady Hestia, and that's when he started discovering spells. That's when he bought the sword, and that's when he met Miss Sosuke Aizen. He was curious what would happen if he had never met Aizen. Would he be the same? He didn't need to worry about that now. So after all the training, which would take a while inside the landscape, it would be like around 3 months. But if you really do the math, that would be like 12 seconds outside. So pretty much after the training, Bell would thank Aizen, as he only has a few more days, I guess you can say, or weeks at the most, before he's fully merged with Bell. As there'd be certain percentage count on how fused he is. The more power he uses, the more Aizen is fused with him, or merged with him. So right now he started out about 10%, but it's gonna get higher and higher from there. As Bell would wake up, or I guess wake up from the inner world, as he would still be in his bed, and it'd be around the same time as he would look at the clock. As he would look down, as Hestia would still be there, as he would just rest for the night. He had been training for 3 months inside his mindscape, so he definitely deserved it. As he would sleep for the night, he would wake up the next morning, as he would get up pretty early, getting his familiar members in their training routine, as he would start to train them in weapons, I guess, weaponship, you would call it. I don't know if you'd call it kenjutsu in this verse, but would start training them how to use their weapons properly, as in this world they didn't really use katanas as much. I mean, he saw the sword princess eyes, but eyes Wallenstein, but he had never really seen anyone else use a sword proficiently. So he had taught everyone how to use a sword, and sooner or later they'll probably be known as the familia who use swords quite frequently. So after the morning training, he would make everyone breakfast as he would head out. Now, if you're wondering, where is Bel Cornell heading to? He's heading to Lady Hephaestus' Familia house. Now, once he would get there, he would see all the Familia members either wielding weapons or just training with their weapons, as he would see Lady Hephaestus and request, to speak with her. Obviously, if you don't know, the Golden Gates, the way to get into the upper world, were made by Hephaestus. So, yeah. Aizen is now, or Bel is now going to ask Hephaestus how to pretty much get into the upper layer of hell, because she's the only one that knows. Maybe Hermes knows, but other than that, no one really knows. As he would walk up to Hephaestus, as they would be in her office, as she would be sitting in her by her desk, as Bel would say, "So, how's the upper world like?" As Hephaestus would be like, "It's a random question, but I don't mind telling you." So, in the upper world, multiple gods, they just rule over Olympus and the other Greek nation that's a little bit below them, but still technically in the upper world. As there's multiple gods and goddesses who haven't descended yet, like Athena, and then it goes to the spirited Shinto gods and goddesses like Tsukuyomi, Izanami, and Izanagi, which aren't really technically gods, but aren't technically human either, but they're spirits. As then she would start to explain all the gods and goddesses that didn't descend, and like I said, Athena. I don't think a lot of the gods descended, so I'm not really sure about the exact number of the people who are still ascended. So pretty much Hephaestus would explain that there's only one way to get up there, but they tell everyone that it was impossible to get up there, which Bel would have a secret smile as he realized once they killed the black dragons and all the gods and goddesses went back up, Bel would find a way to go back and finally enact his plan. But he wasn't actually still sure. Maybe this way isn't actually usable for humans, at least for him, but sooner or later he'll ascend above that. As what would happen next is Hephaestus would explain how the gates are made, and pretty much the only way to break them is if you would have more power than all the gods put together, and that was almost impossible. Or another way is to have the presence of a god. I guess your body just had the aura of a god in a sense. She couldn't really put her tongue on it to explain, but Naruto pretty much knew what she meant. So what would happen next is he would leave, heading over to Hermes. Hermes in this timeline had become Bel's best friend, almost like they had become drinking buddies at that point. As once he would get there, Hermes would kind of welcome him with a wave, as Bel would sit down next to his friend, and Hermes would start to explain to him, "Do you happen to know your parents, Mr. Cornell?" As Bel would say, "Not really." As Bel would say, "I only lived with my grandfather. I don't really know about my grandmother either, or any other relatives." As Hermes would say, "What if I were to tell you that I could know where your grandfather is?" As Bel would say, "That's impossible. He's dead. I don't know how you're gonna do that, Lord Hermes." As Hermes would say, "Come on, drop the Lord. It's just Hermes, As Bel would say, all right, Hermes. How did you find, my grandfather?" As Hermes would say, "Well, the thing is, your grandfather can't really die, and he didn't die to start with." As Bel would say, "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" As Hermes would say, "Yes, your grandfather was Zeus, and your grandmother was Hera." Obviously, it's stated that anytime somebody says Bel Cornell, they said blood of Zeus. Obviously, this can be symbolic, but come on, it's literally saying blood of Zeus. How do you get that wrong? So, pretty much what would happen is Bell would widen his eyes. He had finally figured out the truth, and he would ask him where. As Bell would say, I can have Lady Asphyte, like pretty much Hermes' close captain of the Familia escort you there, the one with the invisibility ability. Cloak? I don't think it's really a cloak, it's like an ability. But pretty much Bell would obviously accept as him and Asphyte, I think her name is Asphyte, I might be wrong though. But they would head over to Zeus's Familia home, where he was residing. None of the family members were there since they were all killed by the Black Dragon, and him and Hera had to, disappear. Now, once Bell would get there over a long journey of going through the deserts, the snowy mountains, and once he would get there, it would have been beautiful, almost like a spring-themed house. There would be flowers everywhere, and it looked almost similar to his mindscape. As he would go up to the house, as once he would get there, he would take a deep breath before opening the door. Now, once he would get there, he would see this tall man with white hair and quite a lengthy white mustache, as obviously this would be, not mustache, but like beard, as this would be none other than Zeus. As Bell would also see Hera. These were both of his grandparents, as Bell would start to tear up seeing them alive and well, obviously not caring whether they abandoned him or not, since that did build his character, as he truly did not really care at that point. Now what would happen is Zeus would say, I see Hermes has told you. So, Bell Cornell, right? It's been a while, hasn't it? As Bell would look over to Zeus, as he would say, yeah, how are you? As Zeus would say, oh, you know me, I didn't want to have to deal with like the whole Familia thing or the status checks constantly, even though I have no Familia members, but I know constant people would pester me about it. But sit down, let me hear about your journey, and then I'll go over mine. As Bell would nod his head, he would go over as he would sit down. As once he would get there, sitting down, he would start to go over his journey. About right after he, quote unquote, died, he had pretty much grown up learning, with his short knife, just a dagger at that point. And he would have told him how he got to Aurario, how he met Hestia, and how they became married, I guess you can say. It was unexpected, of course, but it still happened. Then he explained how he gained the interesting powers of Sosuke Aizen. As Zeus would say, Sosuke Aizen, you say? As he would say, yeah, you want to see him? As Zeus would start to shiver, as he would say, he would look away, as he would be scared of Sosuke Aizen. As Bell would say, don't worry, he doesn't bite. As pretty much she would get out his sword, as obviously Hera would see the beauty of the sword, since Hera is actually quite interested in weapons, I guess just interested in anything that has any elegance or beauty in it. And Zeus would be just as interested, but even though he doesn't really use weapons like that, he just uses his lightning art, he forms lightning, he is the god of lightning at that point. So come on, what do you expect? So what would happen next is Bell would manifest Sosuke Aizen, as he would be sitting there on his chair, as he'd be in his Mugen form, the bandages, not the bandages, but the ceilings, as he would get up, as the seals would fall off, as he would go into the Bleach Soul Anniversary. I can't forget it. It's Aizen's angelic form. I might put it on the screen. I just might, okay? But pretty much what would happen is Aizen would introduce himself to Zeus and Hera, naming him, obviously saying, hey, I'm Sosuke Aizen, Zeus and Hera. I'm very honored to meet you. You are pretty much the strongest gods and goddesses out there. As Bell would say, see, he didn't murk you. He didn't kill you just from seeing you. He didn't output his Ryatsu on you and disintegrate you, even though he could do both. as Zeus would kind of laugh as a sweat drop would run down his face, as they would then sit back down with eyes and some like just manifesting tea, which would be quite a surprise to them. But obviously didn't say anything. Aizen was actually very good at making tea, as you see what in the the Arrancar arc. He had been shown to be drinking tea. I don't know if that was Tozen making that or him, but for now it's gonna be him. But pretty much Bell would start to finish his story, how he pretty much found the sword and it called out to him. At that time, he explained that everyone who touched it had died, as Aizen explained, yeah, anyone who wasn't worthy were killed by my Ryatsu due to it not being compatible with the user. But Bell Cornell seems to be compatible, so he of course started to learn some of my abilities, like Kaizen Sennin, ultimate hypnosis, or my advanced knowledge of Kido, Ho-Ho, and Hakuda, and Zanjutsu, of course. As he would explain that the first time in the dungeon, as he pretty much killed a minotaur on the 5th floor, as he met a sword hero, Eyes Wallenstein, as Zeus would say, as he would start to get perverted and all, as pretty much Bell would say, he would show his hand, as he would kind of be frown at Zeus's perverted nature, as Zeus would be like smacked on the head by Hera, as Hera would tell them to continue, kind of starting a comical moment. Now, pretty much Bell would start to resume his story with him pretty much defeating the Silverback, then going down to the middle floors after getting advice from the elf maid that lived in the not lived in the tower but worked in the tavern. Then after that, his experience how he saw Hestia's goddess form, or at least a fraction of it, as Zeus would say, yeah, let's just say that was pretty strong. As Bell would say, yeah, like I got in a fight with like a level 5 hunter, and that guy, he just started shaking. Like she was all about like sheathe their swords, and Broski just like, nah, I'm just kidding. But basically, he just dropped his sword so fast, like he wasn't trying to die. As obviously he would explain how the dungeon didn't like that, so it wanted Hestia to constantly use her divine form so she can go back to the upper world. And and then he explained how he defeated Goliath and everyone else until he just explained the story. I'm not trying to make this video might be really long if I went over the entire story, but pretty much what would happen is he would explain all the way to the present day, and how obviously Zeus would kind of be a little disappointed about how Bell would work with Freya to kill another goddess or god, since it didn't seem like very organized, but he knew that Ishtar was pretty evil, so I guess it was deserved. But working with Freya, that's something he never predicted to be from Bell. As Bell would say, you're probably wondering why I would work with someone like Freya. Well, I discovered you have a new species in the dungeon, and she's probably the strongest familia in Orario, excluding the Icolos familia or Ernest, since he owns the guild and owns the dungeon. So pretty much he would explain that he wanted to bring the Xenos out, since they were pretty strong, and if they joined him, they could finally feel the peace and coexist with other humans, as this would kind of be the first step to peace, and hopefully the end of the dungeon of constantly going down there and finishing or starting, or I guess continuing the cycle of killing dungeon monsters and dungeon beasts and floor bosses. As Zeus would see Bell's ideals and he truly liked them, but Zeus would say, so I assume you're probably gonna end up by taking over the upper world, I assume, right? It seems like something you would want to approach, right? As Bell would say, of course. Me and Aizen after this would start to merge with myself, as we would have to defeat the Black Dragons, and after that we would have to find a way to get to the upper world by going through the Golden Gates. But other than that, we should be able to beat everyone. and finally bring peace to this accursed universe. Or yeah, I think it's a universe. I may be wrong though. But whatever cosmos it is. But after the meeting, him and Bell, Aizen demanifesting, and Bell and Asphyte heading back to Aurario. Now, what would happen next is Bell would start to. We'll do a time skip. It'll be like about 1 month. Now, in this month, him and the rest of his familia will start to train, with him using the Hokyoku to bounce his familia up to level 2, level 3, and with Haruhime's help, the level booster, they would be like, most of his family members would be at least level 3, with some of them approaching level 6. For some reason, there'd be a huge growth rate of people leaving their familias to join Bell's familia, with people like Eyes and some of the Loki familias joining, like Finn. They would join Hestia's familia, which would be shocking, and Loki would kind of be a little crushed at first, but Eyes would tell her that maybe they should merge their familia with the Hestia familia. Not that it actually been done before. The only time that happens is when you beat the other familia in a war game. But Loki agreed, as they realized that if they want to beat the Black Dragons, then they would need to work together, as the Loki and Hestia familia would merge together, as so would the Take familia, as Lord Take. I don't want to say his full name; it's really long, but he was the more peace type. He was the one who yearned for peace, and he was obviously up for the idea of going to the upper world and having having Bell be the deity. Obviously, so would Loki and Hestia. That was kind of the main requirements of being able to merge their familias together, as pretty much they would start to go to other familias and convince them or buy them out, as they would start to widen their familia, as they would be probably the strongest familia in all of Aurario until they came up to Uranus. Now, what would happen is Bell realized he needs to get rid of Uranus while he still can. He realized if he were to kill Uranus, he would just go back to the upper world. He needs to erase him from existence. Now, Bell came up with a Kido that outputs his Ryatsu, sort of like Hawkeye, and erases the opponent from existence, or the enemy from existence, as he's going to try this on Uranus. So what would happen is he would go meet up with Uranus, as he would see the invisible person with like the weird Reaper hoodie on, and pretty much this person would escort him to Uranus. Now what would happen is Bell would start to say that he's gonna go down into dungeons and retrieve all of the Xenos, offering them to join up in the upper world, since that's what they yearn the most. And due to this desire for that, they won't actually care about the point of joining his familia. So obviously the Icalos familia won't even be a thing after this. After all the Xenos would leave, and it's the downfall at this point. But basically, Ernest would kind of become enraged as he's slowly slipping. His power of the dungeon is lowering, as Bell would start to, impose his territory there. As what would happen is Bell would say, I also can't have you living either. As he would go through some incantations, as he would output his Ryatsu, as a red aura, not a red, but like a purple aura. Forgive me, I meant to say purple, but I said red. As a purple aura would surround him, as he would output it onto Ernest, as slowly but surely Ernest would start choking, as his wrist and his hand would start to disappear into dust, as so would the rest of his body, as he would try to scream out, but his voice box has just disappeared. Just when he was going to scream out, he couldn't anymore, as he would slowly but surely disintegrate. Bell would then pretty much forge a letter saying that a sort of death letter from Ernest, saying that Bell would receive all power over the guild and over the dungeon, as this would be key factor for them to kill the Black Dragons. What would happen next is Bell would forge all of his family members, as they would go down into the dungeon to the lowest level, or at least try to get there. As they'd be on the levels, they would start killing dungeon monsters and getting their magical stones. Belle would come on to a little girl. Now this would obviously be Wine, as she can't really speak at this point. I mean, she will sooner or later. As she speaks with other humans, she'll be able to adapt her speech skills much faster. But once they would, he would find Wine, he would obviously tell everyone that now this was the first Xeno to be part of their new familia. As in, they would all start cheering instead of the usual. Wine was kind of scared that they would, reject the Xenos, but not with Belle's ruling here. So Belle would then go down, as they would have that same party with just him, Belle, and his other friends like Haruhime, Hestia, Bikoto. I don't know if Aisha was there. I don't think so. But just Belle's close friends would be down in the dungeon, with Hermes coming along as well, as he wanted to see these new species of Xenos, as honestly the Xenos would welcome them in peace. As Belle and them would have a nice party before Belle would see all of their intentions, as he would erase them with a few sentences here. He would offer them all the chance to basically join him, as they can reside in the upper world forever if they wish to, and due to their weird lifespan, they would live longer than the regular human, as they would obviously accept this graciously, as they asked, what about the people, won't they reject this? As Belle would say, well, I worked with Freya, as he would remember, flashback, when Belle had went to meet with Freya to talk about taking down the Ishtar Familia. Pretty much what would happen is she would explain that Belle would kind of negotiate for an offer. He would help her taking down Ishtar, while she would owe him later. Now this is Belle, using his favor by bringing up all the Xenos and having him join his familia, with most of them being level 5s and a few of them being level 6, which would be really powerful for him. Having at least level 2s here. Most of the Xenos are level 2, like Wine, she's level 2, but like Light, he's level 5. And with Haruhime's level boost, which Belle managed to get into a drug or a enhancement pill, which he manages to reproduce, and he made thousands of Valis and almost millions of Valis. Obviously, that'll kind of just be a project in the near future, but for now, he's just getting in the research part of it. But after he got all the Xenos and brought them up, there'd be a crowd of people with, let's say, an announcement from Freya. She announced that they shouldn't be scared of them, as long as they, I guess what would happen is she explained that maybe we should learn about them, because the reason why they hate dungeon monsters so much is because they simply don't understand what they are. So maybe this will help in their lessening of their hatred, as pretty much what would happen is the Xenos would come up and start talking to other humans, as they would start to trade information and knowledge, as obviously, let's just say this would be like a new era of peace in a sense. But afterwards, we'll be going over the Black Dragons, defeating them. So they would continue to lower down in the dungeon a few days later after retrieving the Xenos, with the Xenos coming along with them. There'd be about a few thousand Familia members. Obviously, a lot of Familia members, let's just say that. As there'd be about 20 Xenos, as they would go down to the 57th floor, I think, where the Black Dragons reside. As once they would get there, they would see, obviously, the black eye dragon, I believe it's called, but I may be wrong. I saw the image though. Nobody actually knows about the black dragon, so anything I say here, it's off the top of my head. Anything I say here, it's made up. So it might be changed due to the release of more of the novel continuity, as there'd be more information released. But for now, anything I say here isn't actually canonical to the story. So once they would get there, they would see a huge dragon as it would roar towards them. And obviously, the dragon having absorbed Athena, the goddess of war, I believe, and the weaving, of course, as there was a whole story about how she taught as students, but in the end turned her into a spider, as she would be weaving for the rest of her life. It's spider webs and all. but pretty much it would get down there as the dragon would roar, as it would suddenly puff out, and a huge, I guess like an air-based attack, as Bell would then do Bakudo number 81. Dankyu has a huge shield. This was pretty wide. He'd use most of his, I guess a quarter of his Ryatsu. He has a lot of Ryatsu, so quarter is a lot. He'd use about a quarter of Ryatsu to make the shield, as this would block them from the attack, as all of the familiar members who had magical attacks like Ryu would use their magical attacks and go for the head. Like I said, like Aizen says, any weak spot is the head of the creature. So everyone would shoot out their any elemental magical ability, and there'd be a huge, I guess, area effect of just explosions from the magical attacks. As Aizen, or sorry, I keep saying Aizen, as Bell would then put a foothold in the air, as he would go like above, like in the air, for then using Hado no Kyuju, Goryo Tenmetsu, as 5 dragons, as the ground would start to shake, as everyone looked towards Bell, as he was the one increasing this energy, as his body would start to change, going into his butterfly form, as it would start to form the white shells before then going to the chrysalis, before then cracking, and then it would go into his butterfly form with his long red hair and red eyes, as his pupils and his eyes would change into that of a hollows, with the pupils obviously being red instead of yellow or purple. As Bell will then be seen as the Hado number 99 would be enhanced, gaining more power and becoming bigger, as Bell would rush towards the dragon, as it would cut off its head, as the rest of the dragons would start to destroy the black dragon's body, as there'd be a huge magical crystal. Now once he would go up to the crystal, pretty much what would happen is there'd be a huge glow, as Bell would just absorb the crystal, but something weird would pop up. There'd be a voice in his head saying, congratulations, or not in his head, but a voice just aloud, as it would say, congratulations, human race. You have proved to be able to, pass the test and beat the black-eyed dragon, and for that, you have passed. Now all the gods and goddesses will be going back to the upper world, as what would happen is Bell would then start, see Hestia and Hermes, and the rest of the gods and goddesses start to glow before then disappearing. Now Bell would feel like a momentary sadness come over him, until he realized now that he's gonna merge with Aizen and he knows the way to get to the upper world. He's gonna finally achieve his goal of becoming the deity of the universe. So we'll do a time skip for about a week. Everyone had prepared, as Bell had realized a way to basically make a portal to the gates to the upper world. Now after the whole him taking over the upper world, what I'm gonna have is I'm gonna open it, or he's gonna open it, where pretty much you don't need to go through the same process Bell did, but you're free to go whenever you wish. You just have a thought, you'll go there. If you want to go to lower world, you can go there. It's just the matter of where you want to go. As Bell would open the portal, as everyone would start to walk in with their battle armor, as they'd be ready to fight. Obviously, since most gods and goddesses would fight them. Obviously, this would be more like Zeus and Poseidon and Hades. Not really Zeus, but it's kind of something he needs to do. Yeah, truly, Zeus is... even though like Bell is his grandson, he has to abide by the rules of being a god and all. As Bell would face off, he would stand off, as he'd walk in, as a uniform would start to appear upon him. This would be the Mugen outfit of Aizen, as he'd realize that he had, his hair had gotten shorter, as his evolution has truly transcended above any god. As he would see Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades getting ready to fight them in their god forms, as he would finally look at the power, and he would be amazed as Poseidon would start to form a tsunami behind him. It was pretty big. It was like the power of like 20 tsunamis, but it would still be classified as a tsunami. As Hades would then form I think it's Hades. So Poseidon has the trident, I don't know Hades' weapons, but he would form his Cerberus, the three-headed dog. As the dog would start to run towards Aizen, it was pretty huge. As it would go to eat Aizen, like with his mouth, going to try to bite Aizen's head off. Not Aizen's head off, forgive me, Bell's head. If I ever say Aizen, just know I mean Bell. As pretty much Bell would then raise his hand, as he would say, "Poor creature." As suddenly about 100 cuts would appear over his body, as Cerberus would then, I guess, have that dog, how do I say this? Whenever a dog gets hurt, it starts to give that weak, not growl, but like, I don't know how to describe it. It was like, it would groan in pain, and agonizing pain, as it would fall over and disappear. Now Poseidon would then form his trident, as he would go to clash with Bell, as Bell would just easily deflect it, as he would slice down, as huge chest slash would appear over Poseidon before Bell wouldn't give him a chance to regenerate, as Bell would then put his finger up to Poseidon's heart, as he would then use Hado number four, Byakurai, as a huge lightning bolt would go through his heart, killing Poseidon. I know it's like, how do you kill a god if they're immortal and all? Well, let me explain it. So, for example, when it comes to hacks, or I guess you would technically call immortality a hacks. Now, if you have more Ryatsu than the person, then usually you'd be able to your dimensionality is higher above them. So this means you'd be able to go above their abilities because you reside on a higher plane than them. So that's kind of what happened here. Zeus with the my bad. But pretty much Zeus and Hades would be the remaining gods who defied Bel or just didn't like his plan, as pretty much Hades would form like a scythe, I guess. And he can pretty much make any weapon if he desires. So, as Bel would then say, it's quite interesting. You stand up to me, Hades. It's funny how you're like the king of the underworld, yet your wives are fucked by by Hermes. That's very comical, if I do say so myself. As Hades usually is the chill guy. Honestly, he's like really chill. But he would suddenly become enraged. Obviously, just seeing this human, Obviously, Bel is now like immortal and all since he's fused with the Hokyoku. But he would see this human try to look as ascended as him, or appear as ascended, or like a god to them, or to him specifically. As he would summon a scythe before going to cut off Bel's head. As Bel would just bend backwards as the scythe would miss him. He would easily dodge it. As, Bel would grab his wrist, as he would break it before saying, "You should calm yourself, take a few deep breaths. Alright, you don't have any lungs." As he would punch punch a hole through his chest, or at least, he would punch a hole through his chest. He would punch a hole through his chest. As he would say, "Or at least now you don't have any lungs." As he would then punch a hole through his other chest, taking out the other lung. As he would say, "Now you can't take any deep breaths because you're dead." Before he would then use his Ryatsu to, I guess, Hawkeye Hades at that point. It's not even Hawkeye, but it's something like that. It's soul manipulation and existence erasure. Then he would turn around as he would look at Zeus, as a tear would fall down his eyes, as he would appear in front of him, raising his sword above his head, as his hand would start to shake before he would then strike down, ending Zeus's life. As pretty much there'd be no resistance against his force, as he would go through and obviously meet Hestia again. He still felt some sort of sadness in his heart whenever the black dragons were defeated and all. So afterwards, the gods, the realms of the gods and the lower world will then be unified, becoming one, as there'd be no separation, as the Xenos would be able to go up there if they want, the gods can go down if they want, since Hermes didn't miss the world, as Bel would obviously graciously invite him there, as Bel would reside in the lower world with Hestia and the rest of his familiar members, as they truly now became his family. But without further ado, guys, this will be the end of this series on what if Bell wielded Kyoka Suigetsu. Now, I hope you liked the series. I might be making a movie special of this soon, so yeah, watch out for that. Without further ado, guys, have a good day.